brooklynblues.org.
Forward. And I like that, and more so what I like is the fact that you, Mr. Henry, and the cousins mention children in school, because what I've began to notice, and it sounds like, well, I'm only saying this for radio because I spoke about this off the air, but I know you know this. The reality is there's a big bridge, there's a big gap that needs to be bridged, and for not only just to have the conversation, but to have enough people on board from not just the African American community, but everyone. The children have to be engaged and introduced, and some adults need to be reintroduced.
Right.
So this sounds like this is what you guys are working toward.
Yeah, that's definitely what we're working toward, is having people being reintroduced, and I hope that people who love the blues already will love the film, and I think they will, but I hope it will also introduce people who aren't aware of the blues.
Right.
And reintroduce some people who might have forgotten.
Or walked away from it.
Or walked away from it. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's another kind of, that's an important aspect of this, is that another person who I interviewed, this woman, Jamie Hatley, who's a wonderful writer, and she wrote a piece for the Oxford American quite a few years back. I think it's called Why I Hate the Blues.
Mm.
And
she's African American.
She's African American.
Okay.
And I think she said to me when I interviewed her, I felt like that blues was all the suffering and all the pain of the past of black people, and I didn't want to take that on. She said, I didn't want that. And then she said, as she grew older and got reintroduced to more of blues music, she realized that it's also the joy. I mean, and that it's the ability to take this horrific
right.
life circumstance and wring joy out of it, like
That's right.
blood from a stone. I mean,
seriously.
So now she loves the blues as well. But anyway, I think that point of view, because by the 60s, a lot of African American audiences weren't listening to blues either.
They were totally programmed by Barry Gordy.
Well, some of them were listening to some Stax too, which was a good program.
That's the thing, which is funny, but ironic. It's funny but ironic, because Stax was blues. Albert King was on Stax.
Right.
Rufus
Thomas
was on Stax,
who was also part of the Memphis Country Blues Festivals.
See, right? So Stax was still blues based. I personally believe Barry Gordy took a slice of John Dolphin's book, but the difference in the two was Barry Gordy went more for pop, and it was David Ruffins is my most favorite of all time. No one tops David Ruffins as a representative of traditional black music in my book, outside of Sister Lot, who I grew up in church watching her. And it's hard, and I bring him up because he said something in the interview. He said they would write songs, and they would give us the songs, and they would get mad at me. This is me talking him this time. They would get mad at me because they wanted me to sing it this way, but I only knew one way to sing it. So I would try to give them theirs, but I'd do mine. And it just so happens they produced it and mine was better. Right now, when he first said that, I didn't have any understanding of what it was he was discussing. I just thought he meant I sing my style, my style.
Yeah.
But he was actually, in Mr. Ruffins Jr., okay, if you're listening, and Mrs. Ruffins, if you guys are listening, please correct me, but I'm understanding now what he's saying is they wanted a pop, and I gotta call it like I did, a pop wider sound, but I come from the field, I come from Mississippi, this is how I sang, and this is all I can do.
Yeah.
right? And that's different from a style choice than something that's, you know, and so I kind of see the '60s as a, a a movement of pop music when it came to what's considered African American music, and the undertone was the blues or the rhythm and blues, and then you had the what they like to call, what people like to call the hippie scene, or the bistro scene, or what I like to call the folk scene.
Mm-hmm.
That's who really took to the original, the Furry Lewis type cats, the
Right,
Sun House type
absolutely,
cats.
absolutely.
Right. So it's kind of, I don't know, but either or. I guess my question to you now would be, considering all of that, and that was a lot, sorry, but considering all of that and understanding that even prior to the 60s, that let's just say 65 years, from the turn of the century to 1965, 66, a group of black people, a large portion of them, did everything they can to forget the antebellum South. And that goes along with the music, right? And these people had children and children, and we know that children do anything, for the most part, in some cases, to do opposite of what their parents do.
Right.
How can we utilize the film to get all 3 to 4 generations, if we're blessed, some of us are blessed to have one remaining grandparent or great-grandparent. What is your suggestion to get all of these generations in one room to see this film so that we can open up a dialogue?
Well, the first thing is always music. I have also developed a partnership with Music Maker Relief Fund,
Wow.
which is an amazing, amazing organization that their goal is to preserve the music of the American South by supporting the musicians.
Absolutely. Shout out to Cornelius.
Yeah. So, and, lots of wonderful new old artists like Robert Fendley
Right.
is somebody that they helped along. They provide booking agents and help people record and help
Are they
people
paying them is the question.
Yes.
Okay.
And help people get health care. I mean, they put all these, their point of view is that all these kind of organizations that aim to preserve that music, they were more interested in preserving the music than the people who were the purveyors of that tradition,
Absolutely.
the musicians. So they want to help the musicians. That means they help them with health care. That means they help them make money. That means they help them package themselves if that's going to help them make money.
Are they exploiting them?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. So I have discussed with them that when the film is finished, they and I together will search for money to pay artists that they kind of curate that are going through their program to play alongside the film.
Okay.
So I really want to make sure, obviously I'd love to have that happen at a major film festival.
Absolutely.
But I also want to go to rural communities or other communities where people aren't hearing this music, and urban communities.
But we have to.
So I want to make sure that that's a part of it. So I think it's having that multifaceted kind of approach, that it's a film, but I'm going to try and bring live music, and I want to get people talking.
Because it's cultural based.
Because it's cultural based. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
I dig it. What do you got any questions, brother?
No, I'm enjoying the conversation.
Well, I believe we covered this, but I have to ask. You know the question I'm about to ask, because I asked you this two times before, but I'm going to ask you again. What is it that you would love for your audience to receive from this film?
I think I already answered too. I'll answer again very happily, because it's nice to have the opportunity to talk about it. I want them to receive that optimism and excitement coupled with a greater understanding.
Right.
And with the knowledge that if you have that optimism, you have to use that to fight and to move forward.
Right.
You don't just use that to sit around and smile and be happy all day. I mean, that's great if you can do it. Sometimes I get crabby. I don't know about you, but anyway.
No, I agree with you. Enough of the intellectual masturbation. I agree with you.
Right. So take your understanding and use it to do things. Use it to change the way you're thinking. Use it to change the way you're teaching if you're a teacher. You know, like, and think about how the things that you may not think matter could matter a lot. And I can use an example from my own life as a teacher, because I'm a professor at St. Francis College, as you know. And I teach film history. And when I learned film history, it was, you know, Thomas Edison, George Méliès, D.W. Griffith.
Right.
And then we're going on forward. And, you know, these guys all had a couple things in common. They're guys. And they're white guys.
And racist white guys.
And race. Well, I don't know enough about Edison or George Méliès to make those statements, but certainly D.W. Griffith. Yes,
certainly D.W. Griffith.
Absolutely. And so, in the last few years in teaching that, I you know, later came upon, as a graduate student in film history, a lot of information about Oscar Michaud and the whole race film industry, but that was always taught as like an extra and a corrective. So, and still, if you look at standard film history books, they might mention that, but it's always kind of extra.
Yes.
So I make sure that I'm showing as much or more Oscar Michaud than D.W. Griffith in my classes, because I think people know the D.W. Griffith side of things, or they can find it. And now, thankfully, actually, a lot of Oscar Michaud films have just been put on Netflix. So
right.
I'll give a shout out for, for Oscar Michaud on Netflix. And there's some
Absolutely.
Wonderful stuff. He did stuff with Paul Robeson.
That's right.
All kinds of wonderful. And also, it's really amazing as a kind of time capsule for us now to see this affluent African-American world, because you see in a lot of his films, like Within Our Gates, you see everything from people who are quite poor to people who are quite upper class.
That's right, upper echelon. So I agree.
So
that's very necessary.
Yes.
Especially based on this blues conversation. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
Based on this blues conversation in regards to blues people and the blues culture and the blues history, and to now just on America, there is more than one story of African Americans, and I'll go as far as saying there's more than one story on white Americans. I pause because, you know, black, white, yellow, these are colors. That's not necessarily tribal or cultural.
Right.
But just for lack of better terms, you know, there's just more than one story, and for whatever reason, specifically for white America and black Americans, there's usually just one narrative that's driven home.
Right.
So that's just very interesting and key that you brought that up. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think, well, that made me think about, of course, since Thanksgiving's coming up tomorrow, I've been thinking a lot about, you know, how do we talk about Native American culture?
Right, the Aboriginal.
And that's a huge, big topic that I can't solve either. But I mean, I think there's a wonderful documentary film out there that I just showed one of my classes yesterday that's called We're Still Here. Do you know this film?
I have not seen it, but I'm familiar, yes.
And it's about actually that they brought back the Wampanoag language. The Wampanoags were the native peoples who said hello and welcomed the pilgrims.
The ones who got.
And then a lot of them really didn't
yeah. Well,
didn't have positive effects from that. But so I think we're all still here at this point. And we have to, like we said before, find a way to move forward. But that moving forward has to be taking things from the past and bringing them back into our conversation and bringing them back into our culture, and not saying one part of culture is past, or, the past isn't even past, right? As Faulkner said, it's not even over.
No,
it's still here with us. But that's a positive thing, because that means we can continue making meaning and having discussions. And one of the things that's really inspiring about that film, We're Still Here, is some of the most hideous tools of oppression that were used against Native people, forcibly converting them to Christianity when they didn't want to be, and so forth. So they translated the Bible into Wampanoag as a way to get them to forsake their culture. But now that Wampanoag Bible is being used to help people learn Wampanoag, the language, again.
You see how that works?
So I hope that, in a way, this film will do some similar things, bring up some of this very unhappy history in order to move forward.
To address it.
And to address it, and to really deal with it in a way that it hasn't been. Yeah.
I dig it. And as per usual, I'm honored and happy and joyful to sit down and be able to speak with you.
The feeling is very mutual here.
Put it there.
Put it there.
Come on, Brooklyn, what do you got to say, bro?
Hey, I'm just amazed. I learned so much listening to this conversation today, and I'm just in awe.
It's all him.
It's always
He's a smart guy.
I'm just a guy asking questions.
Well, you ask good ones.
Thank you. All right, good folk. My special guest and featured guest of today, Mrs. Augusta Palmer. We spoke about Blues Society, everything that's going on with her journey, and everything that's going on right now that mirrors the era and life of a lot of these musicians that we appreciate. The irony is magnificent, to say the least. But we will be bluesing with you soon. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching on Facebook Live, are we still on Facebook Live? Oh, well, thank you for tuning in anyway. And we'll be back to talk about the blues with you, Jack Dapper Blues.